Everything seemed wrong that night. There was an eerie silence in the house, which presses on the chest. I was cleaning the kitchen after dinner when I felt him watching me. My son was standing in the doorway, his small figure barely standing out in the dim light of the hallway, his eyes staring at me with an intensity I'd never seen before. He slowly crossed the room and sat down next to me, his presence eerily close. Then, in a voice so soft it was almost like breathing, he whispered three words that shattered the peace and opened a door I wasn't ready for. The evening was the same as any other. My son Jason came home from school. His backpack was carelessly slung over his shoulder, and his shoes, as usual, were scattered on the floor. Lately, he's been kind of distant, quiet, self-absorbed, but I haven't given it much thought. After all, he was growing up. Boys have different periods, right? It was normal. At least that's what I told myself. But something in the air felt different that evening. I finished washing the dishes in the kitchen, immersed in the rhythmic washing of dishes. The only sound that broke the silence was the buzzing of the refrigerator, and the clink of dishes in the sink was a reminder that time was running out. Jason barely said a word after dinner, retreating to his room as soon as he finished. I knew I should check on him, ask him about his day, but the fatigue of the past week was starting to weigh on me. My mind wandered, switching between the daily chores I needed to finish and the thoughts that always remained on the surface. But then there was silence. It wasn't the kind of peace that comes at the end of the day when a quiet comfort reigns in the house. No, this silence was heavy. It weighed on my shoulders, making me feel like I was standing on the threshold of something I couldn't name. I felt uneasy, as if a storm was coming over the horizon. I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel and went into the living room, expecting to see Jason bent over his video games or buried in a book. But instead, the room was dark, except for what was right in front of me. For a moment, it seemed to me that time had stopped. I felt my heart beat faster, and a slight pressure built up in my chest. Jason has always been the more reserved of my two children. But this was different. I could feel it in the air. By the way, there seemed to be something unspoken in his gaze. Something that squeezed my insides, making me feel like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, not sure if I wanted to fall or push off. Jason, my voice sounded strange, almost unfamiliar. He didn't answer immediately, but I saw him take a slow, deliberate step toward me, his bare feet making no sound on the wooden floor. The usual confidence he had in him was gone. I didn't recognize this Jason standing in front of me right now. He was different. When he sat next to me on the couch, the air seemed to get thicker and the distance between us decreased. He was closer than I'd ever felt to him in a long time. But it wasn't the warmth I expected. It was not the consolation of mother and son, nor was there the easy familiarity of our relationship. It was something else, something disturbing. I turned to face him, my heart beating louder, a strange mixture of anxiety and curiosity swirling inside me. "What's going on, Jason?" I asked. Trying to sound casual, but my voice was a little shaky. He didn't answer right away, and the silence stretched between us like a tightrope. I could feel the weight of his gaze, as if he was trying to decide something important. Then, after what seemed like an eternity, he spoke. His voice was quiet, almost too quiet, and it sent a chill down my spine. "Mom," he began, and I could see how heavily those words weighed on him, how he was struggling with something that had been rotting inside him for too long. "What's wrong, honey?" I whispered, almost afraid to hear the answer. He looked down at his hands, fiddling with the hem of his shirt. He seemed to be gathering his strength to express what was tormenting him. He stretched out his paws, and at that moment I realized that no matter what he said, I wasn't ready for it. "Mom, I need to tell you something." He finally met my gaze, and the look in his eyes made me shiver. It wasn't just the insecurity of a teenager who didn't know how to communicate. No, it was something deeper. There was fear in his eyes. Fear of me, fear of the truth, the fear of the secret he was about to confess. And then it dawned on me. It was something I wasn't ready for. My breath caught in my throat, and I suddenly felt like I was standing on the edge of a precipice, staring into an unknown abyss. My son, the child I thought I knew so well, was no longer the boy I raised. Whatever he was going to say had the power to destroy everything we've ever been. It changed both of us. And then, in the silence that followed, he whispered these three words: "Mom, I'm sorry." It was like the ground had dropped out from under my feet. Everything turned upside down in my head as I tried to deal with the sudden surge of emotions. I'm sorry for what? I'm sorry for being so distant. I'm sorry for shutting me out. I had no idea what he meant by that. And because of the lack of clarity, everything seemed more intense, more overwhelming. I wanted to ask him, to demand an explanation, but something in his expression told me that the words he had just uttered were just the tip of the iceberg. My heart was racing, and my thoughts were racing in 1,000 different directions. The silence that followed seemed suffocating. I felt the weight of those three words weighing down on me, destroying the sense of security I had created around myself and our family. Jason's apology didn't feel like a simple confession. It felt like the beginning of something much bigger that I wasn't ready for. "What do you mean, Jason?" My voice was shaking, but I couldn't stop myself. The fear that had settled deep in my chest now burst to the surface, mixed with confusion and deep, nagging dread. And then, with a slight tremor in his voice, he spoke again, his words coming out hurriedly as if he couldn't hold them back any longer. "I didn't want to, but it's true, and I can't change anything." He paused, looking away, his eyes searching the room for something that wasn't there. The air felt thick, too thick to breathe. I could feel the walls closing in around us, the space between us shrinking by the second. And then, like the calm before a storm, the silence returned, even heavier than before. No matter what Jason told me, no matter what kind of confession was behind it, it was just the beginning. I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready to hear the truth. But more than anything, I was not ready to change my attitude towards my son. And yet, deep down, I knew that this moment, this night, would end everything I thought I could. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I sat on the couch and looked at my son. His words, those three simple words, hung in the air, weighed down by the weight of what I still had to understand. I've always prided myself on being a good mother, that I knew my children better than anyone else. But now I realize how much I was wrong. I didn't know him as well as I thought I did. "Jason." My voice was barely audible. The word seemed unfamiliar to me, like a request for something I couldn't understand. He wasn't looking at me. His gaze was fixed on the floor. His fingers were nervously clenched in his lap. I could tell he was struggling with something inside, trying to find the right words. But it was clear that whatever he was going to say next would tear the fabric of our reality apart. "I do not know how to explain this," he muttered in a trembling voice. "I didn't want this to happen, but it did. And I can't pretend that it didn't happen." My head was spinning. Thousands of scenarios flashed through my head, each one worse than the last. What did he do? What did he admit to? I wanted to go up to him, hug him, tell him that everything would be fine, but my hand froze in place. I didn't know what to believe anymore. "Jason, please talk to me." There was desperation and pleading in my words. I needed him to open up, to explain himself. The silence between us seemed unbearable, like a chasm that no words could fill. He took a deep breath, his hands shaking. "It was after a hike last month," he began in a barely audible voice. "I haven't told you everything that happened. I didn't mean to hurt you, but now I have to." I felt my stomach twist. A trip to the camp. He went with his friends and their families, including his best friend's older sister, Emily. I didn't think much of it at the time. I trusted him. I believed that he was just another teenager experiencing life, making memories. But now, with every word that came out of his mouth, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, which I wasn't ready for. "I do not know how to say this, Mom, but Emily kissed me," he continued. His voice trembled under the weight of his confession. "It wasn't just a quick kiss. It was real. and I didn't stop him. My breath caught in my throat. Emily, his best friend's older sister. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I've known Emily for years. She was always kind, respectful, like the daughter I never had. But I never expected this. I was thinking feverishly, trying to make sense of what he had told me. Jason, my son, kissed her. And even worse, he didn't stop it. But you were just experimenting, right? I asked, trying to keep my voice level, trying to convince myself that this was just a stage he would overcome. I had to believe it. Otherwise, I would have gone crazy. Jason shook his head, his eyes filled with guilt. It wasn't just that, Mom. I felt different. I didn't know what it meant, but I couldn't stop thinking about her. And it scared me because I didn't want to feel that way. I didn't know how to react. I couldn't get used to this new version of Jason. The boy I thought I knew so well had just revealed a part of himself that seemed alien to me. And now all I had to do was pick up the pieces of reality that seemed to be shattered, like a mirror shattered into 1,000 pieces. He continued, lowering his voice almost to a whisper. I haven't stopped thinking about it since. I didn't want to tell you, Mom. I didn't want to disappoint you, but I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. I felt the weight of his words fall on me like a leaden blanket. There was something so explicit about the way he confessed that it spoke to the fear and shame he felt. As much as I wanted to get angry, scream, demand answers, I knew I couldn't. He was my son, and that was the moment when I had to decide who I would be in his life, what kind of mother I would be. Jason, I finally managed, my voice shaking. I do not know what to say. It means so much to me. I know, he said softly, and his eyes filled with tears. I didn't mean to hurt you, Mom. I didn't want to hurt anyone, but I just couldn't stop thinking about her, and I didn't know what it meant, and I was scared. His vulnerability pierced me like a knife. I could feel his pain, his confusion. He wasn't just telling me about the kiss. He was discovering a part of himself that he didn't understand. The part of him that was still trying to figure out who he was, what he wanted, and how to navigate the confusing maze of emotions that come with growing up. I took a deep breath, trying to find a foothold in the chaos of my emotions. Jason, this is too much, but I need you to understand something. What you've done doesn't define who you are. You're not a bad person. But it's important. Relationships, boundaries, they are important. And you need to learn to respect both your own feelings and those of others. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. I know, Mom. I didn't mean to offend anyone. I just didn't know what to do. I hugged him tightly, feeling the weight of everything he had just said. He was still my son, the same boy I'd held in my arms when he was a baby, the same boy I'd watched grow up to become someone I barely recognized. But the moment I hugged him tightly, I realized that this was a turning point for both of us. You're going to make mistakes, Jason, I whispered, my voice breaking. But that doesn't mean I'm going to give up on you. We'll figure it out together. You're not alone. He nodded, clinging to me, his body trembling in my embrace. I'm so sorry, Mom. I do not know how to fix it. I kissed the top of his head, my heart heavy with the realization that our relationship had changed in a way I wasn't ready for. But as I hugged him, I realized one thing for sure. We'll get through this together. It won't be easy, but we'll get through it. And maybe, just maybe, it was that moment that shaped the man he became. Don't worry about fixing anything right now, Jason, I said softly. We will act gradually. Just promise me that you will always be honest with me, no matter how hard it is. I promise, Mom. His voice was full of emotion, and for a moment I wondered if he really understood what he was promising. I don't know if I'll ever be able to look at Emily the same way again. The pain in his eyes grew, and I realized how much it was eating him up inside. He was hurting too. My anger, my fear, my shock. They were all legitimate feelings, but they couldn't hide the fact that my son was hurting too. I didn't mean to hurt her, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, especially you. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. The depth of his regret tore at my heart. It was clear he was as lost as I was, struggling to understand the implications of his actions, struggling with feelings he wasn't prepared for. And I, his mother, was sitting here trying to make sense of it all. But maybe, just maybe, that was the key. I didn't need to realize that right now. I didn't need to have all the answers. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. Jason, we'll get through this. I don't have all the answers, but I'm here for you. We'll get through this together. He looked at me, his eyes filled with something between relief and doubt. You really mean that? I nodded, my voice quiet but firm. Yes, we'll get through this, but it'll take time, and it'll hurt, but we'll do it together. And as I said those words, I realized something. The pain, the uncertainty, the fear, they were all part of growing up for both of us. We didn't need to know all the answers right away, but for the first time in a long time, we faced that uncertainty together. The days that followed were quiet, filled with long, introspective silences. Jason and I spoke less, but there was an unspoken understanding in the few words we shared. I wasn't sure what the future would bring, but I had come to the conclusion that we couldn't rush this healing process. It would take time for both of us, time to process, to forgive, and to repair what had been broken. One evening, I watched my son sitting on the porch, looking out at the fading sunlight. The confusion had faded from his face, though the hurt was still there, lingering in the depths of his eyes. I sat next to him, our shoulders lightly touching. Neither of us spoke, but the comfort of the silence was enough. You are not alone, I whispered after a while, the words slipping out like a quiet promise. Jason didn't respond right away, but he didn't need to. His hand found mine, and for a moment we sat together in shared silence, letting the weight of the last few days ease. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But we had a chance to heal, and that was enough for now. In that moment, I realized that despite the pain, despite the uncertainty, the bond between us could never truly be broken. It would bend, it would stretch, but it would always be strong. Because love, even in its most fragile form, had a way of guiding us back to each other.